I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully, because if I rush this, you won't understand what I lost. You won't feel the weight of what they did. So I'm going to slow down. I'm going to show you every small moment, every calculated step, because that's the only way you'll understand how I took everything from them without raising my voice. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm 32 years old, and this is the story of how my family destroyed me and how I destroyed them back. The first sign that everything was about to change arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. I was sitting in my office, a corner desk at Sterling & Associates, the marketing firm where I'd worked for 7 years, when my mother called. Not texted. Called. At 8:47 a.m. on a workday. My mother, Margaret Chen, who believed that phone calls were for emergencies and old people. I stared at the phone for 3 rings before I answered. "Hi, Mom. Sarah, your father and I need to talk to you about something important." Her voice had that specific pitch it got when she was nervous. I'd heard it exactly twice before, when my father's business struggled in 2015 and when she had to tell me my childhood dog died. My stomach dropped. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Yes, no, not over the phone. Can you come to dinner on Friday? Just family." I knew what that meant. "Is it about David?" I asked. My brother, David Chen, had recently graduated from his MBA program. He was talented, genuinely talented, but he was also lazy in ways that mattered. The kind of lazy where you show up late to important meetings. The kind of lazy where you forget details. The kind of lazy where you coast on other people's work. "Just come Friday," my mother said. 6 o'clock, your father is making his special dumplings." She hung up before I could ask another question. I sat there for a long time, my hand still holding the phone to my ear, listening to nothing. Here's what you need to understand about my family. My parents didn't immigrate to build a life. They immigrated to build an empire. They came from Taiwan in 1982 with $47 in their pocket and a 4-year-old son. That son was my older brother, Michael. He's not relevant to this story except that he set the precedent. If you were a Chen, you were supposed to be exceptional. My father, Thomas Chen, built his reputation in supply chain logistics. Not glamorous, not the kind of business that makes people excited, but it was brilliant. He understood systems the way other people understand language. He could look at how products moved from factories to warehouses to customers, and he could see inefficiencies that no one else noticed. In 1995, he started his own company, Chen Logistics Solutions. By the time I was born in 1992, we had money, real money. My mother, Margaret, came from old Taiwan money. Her family made textiles. She married down, according to her parents, but she married smart. She and my father understood partnership, and they understood something else. They understood that they needed someone to teach them everything they didn't know about the American market. That someone was me. I was 11 when I first sat in on one of my father's business meetings. Not because he asked me to, because I overheard him struggling to explain something to a potential client, and I walked downstairs, sat down at the table, and said, "You're explaining it wrong." He doesn't care about the logistics. He cares about cost per unit reduction and predictability. The client's eyes lit up. My father looked at me the way you look at someone who just handed you a winning lottery ticket. "How did you know that?" he asked. "Because he said so," I said, pointing to a comment the client had made 15 minutes earlier that my father had missed. "You weren't listening to what he wanted. You were just talking about what you knew." My father didn't say anything, but after that meeting, he started asking me to sit in on calls, not to talk, just to listen, and then to tell him what I heard. By the time I was 15, I was basically his business strategist. Not officially, but I was the person he called when a deal wasn't moving. I was the person who listened to client calls and told him what was actually being said underneath the words. I was the person who understood that business wasn't about being the smartest person in the room. It was about understanding what people actually wanted. By 23, when I graduated from college, my father offered me a position in the company. Not an entry-level position, a management position. He wanted me to run business development. I said no. I'll never forget the expression on his face, like I'd slapped him. I want to do my own thing, I told him. I want to build something that's mine. It was the kindest way I could think of to say, I'm not going to spend my whole life in your shadow. He never recovered from that, not really. He offered me a salary, then a partnership stake, then equity, each offer bigger than the last, each one a way of saying, please don't leave me. Each one a way of saying, you're the only one who understands. But I left anyway. I went to Sterling and Associates as a junior strategist. Within 4 years, I was a senior manager. Within 6, I was handling the company's biggest accounts. I built a reputation for something specific. I could take complicated problems and make them simple. I could look at a struggling company and see exactly what was bleeding money. I was good at my job. I was really, really good. And then my brother graduated with his MBA, and my parents decided they wanted him to take over the family business. Friday night arrived with the kind of weather that makes you forget it's spring. Cold rain. The kind that makes you think the season is broken. I drove to my parents' house in the suburbs, the one my father built in 2001, the one that had always felt too large, and I already knew how the night was going to go. My mother would make small talk for 20 minutes. My father would ask about work. Then my father would clear his throat, and my mother would excuse herself to check on dessert, which was already made. Then my father would tell me the decision that had already been made. The dumplings were perfect. My father's cooking was the one thing he never delegated, never let anyone help with. The wrapper was so thin you could almost see through it. The filling was pork and chives, seasoned with sesame oil and soy sauce. He made them by hand, 3 times a month without fail. How's work? My father asked, dipping a dumpling in vinegar. Good, I said. We just won a new account, mid-sized manufacturing company. They're struggling with their positioning, so we're repositioning their entire brand strategy. How much are they paying? My father asked. He always asked this, not to be rude, to understand the market. 600,000 for the first year, probably more if we execute well. My father nodded. He was thinking about something. I could see it in the way his jaw was moving. My mother excused herself to check on dessert. Your mother and I have been talking, my father said, and there it was, the moment. About the future of the company, about David. I kept eating. He's finished his MBA now. He's been working as a consultant, learning how businesses actually operate. We think he's ready. We think it's time for him to lead Chen Logistics. I swallowed my dumpling. As CEO, I asked. As president, my father said. I'll stay on as chairman for a few years, help him transition. But yes, he's going to run the company. Okay, I said. Okay. Sure, it's your company. You should put whoever you want in charge. I said it calmly. I said it the way you'd say you're fine with someone's restaurant choice when you don't care what you eat. And I watched my father's face register the fact that I wasn't fighting him. He'd been prepared for a fight. He'd probably spent all week preparing for it. We thought you might want to be involved, he said. Part of the executive team, advising David. You'd have a seat at the board table. I'm good, I said. Like I said, it's your company. I'm happy doing what I'm doing. And that was the weird part. I was genuinely happy doing what I was doing. I had a life that was completely separate from my family's business. I had clients. I had a team. I had colleagues who respected me because of my own work, not because of my last name. But my father looked devastated anyway. Your mother thought you might, he trailed off. Might what? Want to be part of this? I looked at my father, really looked at him, and I understood something I'd never fully understood before. He didn't want me to help him because he needed the help. He wanted me to help him because he needed to know that I wanted to, that I chose him over myself. I'm happy how things are, I said. Is David excited? My father nodded slowly. Very excited. He has some ideas. He wants to modernize the company, bring in new technology, expand into new markets. That's great, I said, and I meant it. David's smart, he'll figure it out. And that was the moment where I should have seen what was coming. That was the moment where everything depended on whether I paid attention or not. But I was too busy being relieved that this conversation was easy. Too busy being glad that I could maintain distance from the family business without guilt. Too busy being impressed with myself for having a life that didn't require their approval. So I missed the thing my father didn't say out loud. I missed the part where he was afraid, where he was hopping I'd fight him, where he was thinking, if Sarah doesn't want in, then David is all I have. My mother came back with dessert, red bean cakes, which was not my favorite, but my father's favorite. She set them down and looked at me carefully. "You're not upset?" she asked. "Why would I be upset?" "I don't know," she said. "I thought you might be." "I'm not," I said. "I'm really not." And I drove home that night thinking that was the end of it. The thing about being talented is that other people see it before you accept it about yourself. By late April, David had been running Chen Logistics for exactly 30 days, and the company had already lost a major client. I didn't hear about it from my father. I heard about it from someone at a cocktail party who asked me if I was concerned about the news. I had no idea what news they were talking about. I went home and called my mother. "What news?" I asked. There was a pause, the kind of pause that tells you someone is deciding how much to lie. "Your father will call you," she said. He called me 20 minutes later. "We lost Sterling Machinery," he said without preamble. "They're moving to a different logistics provider." Sterling Machinery was one of their biggest clients. Not the biggest, but significant. They'd been with Chen Logistics for 12 years. I knew this because I had brought them in, sat in their offices for weeks, understood their problems, designed a solution that fit perfectly into their needs. It was 2011 when I did this. I was 23 years old and acting like someone 20 years older. I remembered every detail of that negotiation because I'd been proud of it. It felt like the first real proof that I could do something on my own. "Why?" I asked. "David mishandled the renewal," my father said. "They called in March. They wanted to renegotiate the contract. David told them our prices were competitive and non-negotiable." "What are you talking about? Sterling Machinery always negotiates. That's how they operate. You have to negotiate with them." "I know that," my father said quietly. "Didn't David read the account history?" "I don't think he looked at it." There was a pain in my father's voice that made me feel something sharp. I didn't want to feel it. I wanted to stay separate from this, but the pain was there anyway. "What's the contract value?" I asked. $850,000 a year. My lungs stopped working for a second. "They're leaving because of price?" I asked. "They're leaving because David treated them like they were fungible," my father said. "They're leaving because they realized they weren't special to us anymore. They're leaving because no one understood them." And there it was. There was the thing he wasn't saying. The thing he was saying was actually this: "I'm sorry, I made the wrong choice. I should have let you do this." "I'm sure David will learn," I said. I said it the way you say things to comfort people. Not because you believe them, but because they need to hear them. "Your mother suggested you might want to consult," my father said carefully, "just to help David transition, to show him how to handle situations like this. No pressure, just a conversation." This was the moment. This was the moment where my life changed direction. This was the moment where I should have said no, where I should have set a boundary, where I should have protected myself. Instead, I said, "Okay, I can probably grab coffee with David one day." "Thank you," my father said, and he sounded relieved in a way that made me understand that he was more afraid than I'd realized. I met David at a coffee shop called Ember, which was in the downtown area where we'd both spent time. It was a neutral location, neither of our territories. David was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, looking at his phone with the kind of intensity you use when you're trying to avoid being noticed. He looked up when I sat down, and I saw something flicker across his face. Shame, maybe, or defensiveness. He was 2 years younger than me with our mother's features, the sharper cheekbones, the smaller eyes, and he was dressed in the way that said he was trying to look like someone in charge. Expensive blazer, expensive watch. The kind of costume that people wear when they're not entirely sure that the real version of them is impressive enough. "Thanks for doing this," he said. "It's fine." Dad seemed stressed. David's face tightened. Dad always seems stressed. Yeah, but this was different. I ordered coffee while David watched me, and then I asked him, "What happened with Sterling Machinery?" "They wanted us to lower our prices," he said. I said no. The price was already competitive. "Sterling Machinery doesn't operate that way," I said. "They always try to renegotiate. It's part of their culture. They test to see if you value them enough to negotiate." "That sounds manipulative," David said. "It's not manipulative. It's just how they work, and we always negotiated with them. We'd usually land on a price that was slightly lower but still profitable because the relationship was valuable. They've been with us for 12 years. So we're supposed to just accept that they're going to push us around." "No," I said carefully. "We're supposed to understand what they actually want. They don't want the lowest price. They want to know that they're important to us, that we're willing to make adjustments for them, that they matter." David was looking at his phone again. "I get it," he said. "You're trying to tell me I screwed up." "I'm trying to tell you how Sterling Machinery operates, so that if they call back—" "They won't call back," David said. "They signed with someone else already." The coffee arrived. I picked it up and held it in both hands, not drinking it, just holding it. $850,000 a year, I said quietly. "I know how much the contract was worth," David said. "Do you?" I asked. "Because if you did, you would have spent more than 5 minutes understanding how they negotiate." "You know what?" David said, and he stood up. "I didn't call this meeting. Dad did, and I was trying to be respectful and listen to what you had to say. But I'm tired of feeling like I'm supposed to prove myself to you. You're not my boss. You're not on my board. You're just my sister, and you don't have all the answers." He left, just walked out. Didn't wait for a response. Didn't even throw back a chair dramatically. Just calmly stood up and left me sitting with a coffee I hadn't asked for in a place that suddenly felt like a trap. I sat there for another 10 minutes, thinking about what he'd said. He was right that he wasn't my boss. He was right that I wasn't on his board. And he was right that I didn't have all the answers. But what he wasn't right about was the idea that I'd been trying to prove myself to him. I'd been trying to help him, not destroy the family business. I'd been trying to save something that, it turned out, wasn't really mine to save. The humiliation didn't start with Sterling Machinery. It started about a week after that. I was in a meeting with a client, a software company that was restructuring their entire go-to-market strategy, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "Can you call me when you get a chance?" I didn't call her until I was back in my office, door closed. "Hi, Mom, what's up?" "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you react," she said. Those are the words that precede every terrible announcement. That's the phrase that means someone else has made a decision about your life. "Okay," I said carefully. "David told us about your meeting. He said you were critical and dismissive, and he felt like you didn't respect him." I couldn't speak for a second. "That's not what happened," I said. "He said you made him feel stupid for losing the Sterling Machinery account." "I didn't." "Sarah, I'm just telling you what he said. And your father is very concerned that you're going to undermine David's authority at the company. He's concerned that you're going to make his job harder." "I'm not trying to do that. I was just—" "We know," my mother said, and her voice had shifted. It had that tone that meant she was delivering a message from my father. "But we need you to understand something. David is the CEO now. You're not. And if you want to be involved with the company, you need to respect his leadership. That means you don't offer unsolicited advice. That means you don't second-guess his decisions. That means you let him build his own path." I was breathing in small increments. "Are you hearing me?" my mother asked. "I'm hearing you," I said. "And you understand." Yeah, I understand. David is the CEO. I should stay out of company decisions. Thank you, my mother said, and she sounded relieved. Your father was very upset about the meeting. He thinks that you're being bitter about not getting the position. I'm not bitter about that. Good, because that would be very unfair to David. He worked hard to get his MBA. He's worked hard to earn this. He deserves the chance to succeed without you trying to prove that you would have been better. I'm not trying to prove anything, I said, and I heard my voice getting small. I know, sweetheart, I know, but perception is reality. And right now, David is perceiving you as an obstacle, so we need you to be supportive. We need you to be in his corner. Can you do that? I said yes. I said yes because I wanted the conversation to end. I said yes because I didn't know how to argue. I said yes because when your mother asks you something like that, the default answer is yes. But what I was really doing was conceding. I was giving my family the message that I would accept their version of events even when it wasn't true. That I would silence myself to protect David's feelings. That I would become smaller to make him feel bigger. The problem with accepting that version of events is that it never ends. Once you give ground, everyone expects you to keep giving ground. Once you show that you'll stay quiet, everyone assumes you're okay with whatever comes next. What came next was a campaign. I didn't notice it at first. It was too subtle for that. It was the kind of campaign that only works when the target isn't expecting to be targeted. 3 weeks after the Sterling machinery loss, my mother had me to lunch. Just us. She chose the restaurant, a small French place downtown where we'd always gone for special occasions. I should have known that when your mother invites you to a special occasion restaurant for a regular Thursday, something is wrong. I wanted to talk to you about something, she said, after we'd ordered. Something that David mentioned, and I need you to understand that I'm telling you this as your mother, not as someone criticizing you. But David said something that worried us. What did he say? I asked. He said that when you two had coffee, you made him feel like he was stupid. He said you explained everything as if he couldn't possibly understand it on his own. He said it felt condescending. This was not what had happened. What had happened was I'd given him information. What had happened was he'd been defensive and then left. But I could see how, if you were already primed to see me as threatening, you might reinterpret the conversation as condescension. I wasn't trying to be condescending, I said. I know, but that's how he felt, and we need to be mindful of that. We need to be mindful that David might be insecure right now, and that we need to be supportive. I am supportive, I said. Are you? My mother asked, and her voice had that quality it got when she was about to say something she'd been rehearsing. Because I've been hearing things about you. People in the industry asking me why you're spreading rumors about how David lost Sterling machinery. People wondering if there's drama in the family. I'm not spreading rumors, I said. I haven't told anyone anything. Then how are people hearing about it? I don't know. Maybe David told them. Maybe Dad did. My mother set down her fork carefully. Sarah, I think you need to be very careful about how you're positioning yourself. Because right now, it looks like you're trying to undermine your brother. And that's not okay. That's not the kind of daughter I raised. The lunch arrived. I wasn't hungry, but I cut into my fish anyway. I cut it into very small pieces because I needed something to do with my hands. I'm not trying to undermine David, I said. I'm really not. Then I need you to prove it, my mother said. I need you to do something to show us that you support him. I need you to do something public, something that shows people in the industry that you stand with David. Like what? I don't know, my mother said. Maybe write a recommendation letter, or call some of your clients and tell them about Chen Logistics, or post something on LinkedIn about how proud you are of David taking over, something like that. And here's the thing about this request. It wasn't inherently unreasonable. A lot of people would see it as perfectly normal. A mother asking her daughter to support her brother. A family asking for solidarity. But what it actually was a test. It was a way of checking to see if I could be controlled. It was a way of checking to see if I would compromise my integrity to maintain my family's image of me as supportive. It was a way of checking to see if I understood that this was no longer about David's success. This was about David's dominance. "Okay," I said, "I can do that." And my mother smiled, and the lunch went back to being pleasant, and I sat there cutting my fish into smaller and smaller pieces and understanding that something had shifted. I didn't post on LinkedIn. I couldn't quite make myself do it. But I didn't refuse either. I just let it slide. Didn't do it, but didn't explicitly say no. Which meant I was being passive-aggressive, which meant I was being unsupportive, which meant I was confirming everything my mother had been worried about. By June, David had fired the operations manager who'd been at Chen Logistics for 8 years. A woman named Alina who'd been with the company since my father was still actively running it. A woman who knew how everything worked. A woman who understood every client relationship. When I heard about this, I felt something in my stomach that I can only describe as a premonition. Not of what David would do next, of what I would do in response. Of the fact that the woman I was going to become was being born right now, in this moment, while I sat at my desk and thought about how deeply David had misunderstood the operations of the business he now ran. I called my father. "Why would you fire Alina?" I asked. "David made that decision," my father said. "It wasn't my call." "But you had to approve it. She's been there since 2001. David said she was too focused on maintaining the old way of doing things. He said she resisted his ideas about modernizing. "Because his ideas are bad," I said. I said it flat, not emotional, just stating fact. "Alina knows what she's doing. David is destroying the company." "Sarah." "No, listen to me. David has now cost you the largest new client we've gained in 5 years, and he fired the most senior operations manager we have. He's burning capital. He's not modernizing. He's destroying." My father was quiet. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. And I realized in that moment that he was asking me to save him. That beneath all the things he'd said about respecting David's leadership and letting David build his own path, he was hoping I would step in. That he was counting on me to fix what he'd allowed David to break. And I thought about what my mother had said about proving my loyalty. I thought about the fact that the way to prove loyalty had been to make myself smaller. That the way to show I supported David was to validate his choices even when they were mistakes. "I don't know," I said. "I can't help you with this. This is your company and David's responsibility." "Sarah." "I have to go," I said, and I hung up. I sat in my office for the next hour and made a decision. I decided that I was done being the person my family thought I should be. I decided that I was done being criticized for my unwillingness to be the thing they needed me to be. I decided that I was going to become something else entirely. I became cold. I became strategic. I became someone who watched instead of someone who participated. I became someone who smiled and nodded and said the right things while taking detailed mental notes of everything that was said to me. I became someone who had no intention of saving my family's business. I became someone who was going to watch it burn. And then I was going to pick up the pieces and show them what I could have done. The transformation happened in the space of a week, but it felt like the crossing of a border. On one side was Sarah, the woman who wanted her family's approval, who wanted to be seen as reasonable and supportive, who wanted to be the kind of daughter that mothers show pictures of to their friends. On the other side was someone I didn't have a name for yet, someone cold, someone clear, someone who was going to pay very close attention to what was happening, because attention was the only weapon I would need. I started keeping a file, nothing dramatic, just a file on my computer called Notes. I put dates and times and conversations in that file. I documented every client loss, every stupid decision, every time my brother made a choice that any reasonable person would have questioned. July, lost 2 small clients because David decided to consolidate accounts without asking them first. August, hired a consulting firm that cost $150,000 and implemented strategies that were directly contrary to how the company had successfully operated for 20 years. September, made a verbal commitment to a major retail company without finalizing the contract details. When the contract came due, the retail company pulled out because David hadn't included price guarantees that they required. My father called me in October, 2 weeks after the retail company loss. "We need to talk," he said. I met him at his office, not the family house, his office, which meant he wanted to be the authority here. He wanted to be the father in a suit, not the man whose son was destroying his life's work. "Chen Logistics is in trouble," he said without preamble. "We've lost 6 significant clients in the past 6 months. Our revenue is down 32%. The board is questioning David's leadership." I said nothing. "I'm asking you to come back," he said. "Not as a consultant, as VP of Business Development, your old position. I want you to help stabilize things. I want you to be there to guide David. I want you to help us stop the bleeding." And here's where the old Sarah would have said yes. Here's where I would have felt that familiar pull of responsibility. Here's where I would have heard my father's pain and decided it was my job to fix it. But I'd changed. "No," I said. "Sarah, you chose David," I said calmly. "You decided that he was the person to run the company. You decided that I was the threat. You decided that my input was unwelcome unless I was willing to be completely supportive of whatever David did. So no, I'm not going to come back and fix what David broke. That's not my responsibility." "You're right," my father said quietly. "I made a mistake." The statement hung in the air between us, and I realized something. He was waiting for me to forgive him. He was waiting for me to be the bigger person. He was waiting for me to tell him that it was okay, that family comes first, that I would help him anyway because that's what love means. "I know you did," I said. "I hope you've learned something from it." I stood up to leave. "What do you want?" my father asked. I turned back. "What do you mean?" "You're clearly planning something. I can see it. You're not here to save me, so what do you want?" I looked at my father, and I understood that he saw me. He saw that I'd changed. He saw that the person sitting across from him was not the daughter he thought he knew. "I want you to understand what you threw away," I said. "I want you to understand what David is and isn't, and I want you to watch it all come down." I said it without anger, without volume, just as a simple statement of fact. And then I left. Now I need to tell you what happened next, because this is where the story gets interesting. This is where I stopped being someone with a grudge and became someone with a plan. I went to Sterling Machinery. I called the owner, James Kellerman, someone I'd met dozens of times during the original negotiations. We'd built a good relationship. The kind that was real, not transactional. The kind where people actually liked working together. "James, it's Sarah Chen," I said. "I know it's been a while." "Sarah," he said, and I could hear a smile in his voice. "It really has been. How are you?" "I'm good. I'm actually calling because I wanted to explain something that happened with your account at Chen Logistics." "The situation with your brother," he said. "You know about that." "Sarah, David called me 2 months ago trying to get you back. He basically told me that he'd screwed up and that you were the one who originally worked with us." I felt something like satisfaction, but controlled, cold. "I wanted you to know that I no longer work for Chen Logistics," I said. "I haven't for years. I'm with Sterling and Associates. I'm their senior manager for business development. And I'm calling because I think I can help you with some of the problems that made you leave." There was a pause. "Are you trying to get us to come back to Chen Logistics?" James asked. "No, I'm leaving Chen Logistics. Permanently. I'm calling because we, Sterling and Associates, I think we could actually serve you better than anyone else. I know your business. I know what you need. And I'm going to show you that." What I did next was not illegal. Let me be very clear about that. This is important. Because what I did was strategic and careful and designed to look like a natural coincidence. I developed a solution for Sterling Machinery that was better than anything Chen Logistics could have offered. I structured it so that Sterling and Associates would act as a consultant to help them optimize their logistics, and I brought in a logistics partner, not Chen Logistics, who was more aligned with Sterling Machinery's needs. James Kellerman signed a contract with us. The contract value was $950,000 for the first year. My boss, Richard Sterling, was confused. "Where did this come from?" he asked when I told him I'd landed the account. "I used to work with them," I said. "I just reached back out." "How much of the work are we actually doing?" "All of it," I said. "I'm the point person. I'm doing the strategy. We're outsourcing the execution to partners, but we're managing it. This is our account." Richard looked at the contract value and stopped asking questions. Now here's where I need to pause and tell you something important. What I did next was not done out of revenge. Not exactly. Revenge implies that I was being destructive. What I did was strategic. I was building something. I was building a different future. But the way I built it meant that my family's business suffered, and I was okay with that. I was more than okay with that. I was doing it intentionally. I started reaching out to other Chen Logistics clients, not to steal them. I wouldn't have known how to do that even if I'd wanted to. But I reached out as an old friend. I asked how they were doing. I asked if they were happy with their current logistics providers. And then I listened. Most of them weren't happy, because David had made the same mistakes with them that he'd made with Sterling Machinery. He'd been dismissive. He'd been inflexible. He'd treated their needs as secondary to his own need to prove that he could run the business better than my father. By January, I'd brought 5 new accounts to Sterling and Associates. 5 clients who'd previously worked with Chen Logistics. 5 clients who understood exactly what I was doing and didn't care, because I was giving them something better. Sterling and Associates' revenue increased by $2.7 million. My father's revenue continued to decrease. The breaking point came in February. It came in the form of a phone call from my father. "You're doing this deliberately," he said. "You're going after our clients." "No," I said. "I'm not going after anyone. I'm offering services to companies who need them. If those companies happen to have worked with you, that's coincidence." "That's a lie," he said. "Is it?" I asked. "Did I call first, or did they call me?" He didn't answer. "Did I offer them anything that you weren't already offering?" I asked. "Or did I just listen to what they actually needed?" "You knew them," he said. "Through us, you're using information." "Dad, I'm using a skill. I'm using the ability to understand what clients actually want. I'm using the ability to listen. These are skills that I've had my whole life. I'm not using any proprietary information. I'm just being better than David." "This is betrayal," my father said. "No," I said, "this is business." And I hung up. But hanging up wasn't the end. Because by March, something else happened. Something that I hadn't planned for. Something that made everything that came before look like a prelude. My father's company received a notice. A legal notice. From a company named Kellerman and Associates, James Kellerman's holding company, regarding intellectual property. Apparently, when James had switched to Sterling and Associates, he'd taken some of the files and documentation that Chen Logistics had created for his account. And when I'd worked on the Sterling and Associates solution for James, I'd created new documentation. David, being David, had created a memo claiming that he'd developed the Sterling Machinery strategy at Chen Logistics, and that the new strategy was derivative of Chen Logistics' work. He was claiming ownership of my work. He was trying to argue that Sterling and Associates had stolen Chen Logistics' intellectual property. It was deeply stupid. It was the kind of claim that a lawyer would spend 30 seconds demolishing, but the legal letter existed, and it was threatening. My father called a lawyer immediately. The lawyer read David's memo and then called my father back. "Who wrote this memo?" the lawyer asked. "My son," my father said. "Does he have any evidence that this strategy originated with Chen Logistics?" "No, my daughter developed it, for Sterling and Associates." "Then you have no case," the lawyer said. "In fact, this memo could be used against you. If anyone tries to argue that you were conspiring to steal IP, this memo makes it look like your company was planning a fraudulent claim." The letter was dropped, the claim went away, but the damage was done. Because my father finally understood what David was. He finally understood that David wasn't just bad at running a business. David was someone who would lie, claim ownership, and deflect blame when confronted. He finally understood what I'd been trying to tell him. The first sign that everything was actually coming apart came when my mother called me in April. "Your father is having chest pain," she said. "The doctors think it's stress-related, but they want to monitor him." I said I'd come to the hospital. My father was in a private room, hooked up to machines that beeped at intervals. He looked smaller than I remembered, diminished, like something essential had been removed from him. "Hi, Dad," I said. He turned to look at me. "I'm sorry," he said. I didn't say anything. "I was wrong," he continued. "About all of it. I wanted David to be you and he couldn't be. I chose him anyway, and I hurt you." "You did," I said. "I know," he said, "and I'm paying for it." I sat in a chair next to his bed, and I felt something. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the beginning of something that might eventually become forgiveness. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I'm going to restructure the company," he said. "I'm going to move David out of the CEO position. I'm going to hire someone from outside to run it. Someone professional. Someone without ego." "Okay," I said. "And I'm going to apologize to everyone we've lost," he said. "I'm going to try to rebuild relationships, and I'm going to hope that you'll help me." This was the moment. This was the moment where I could have said yes, where I could have let him fix it, where I could have stepped in and saved Chen Logistics from total collapse, where I could have taken back all the power I'd spent 6 months quietly accumulating. But I'd changed too much. The person I'd become couldn't go back to being the person my family needed. "I can't," I said. "I'm sorry, but I can't." "I know," my father said. "I know you can't, but I had to ask." What happened next unfolded over the next 2 months. My father hired a new CEO, a woman named Patricia Zhang who'd run logistics companies for 30 years. Patricia reviewed the company's accounts, spoke with the clients that were left, and made a clear assessment. Chen Logistics had not managed a good transition. There were relationships that had been damaged, clients who felt ignored, and operations that were inefficient. Patricia called me, which meant my father had given her my contact information. "I understand you worked on Sterling Machinery originally," she said. "I did," I said. "And you built the relationship with them." "Yes." "Would you be open to consulting with us on how to reapproach them?" And here's where I had a choice. Here's where the story could have gone a different direction. I could have said yes. I could have helped patch things up. I could have been the bridge that brought Sterling Machinery back to Chen Logistics. But I'd spent 6 months making a different choice, over and over again. "No," I said. "I'm not interested in consulting for Chen Logistics, but thank you for asking." What actually ended the story was something smaller and quieter than I expected. It didn't come with fanfare. It came with a single fact that emerged during Patricia's audit. David had been taking money. Not a little, not some small amounts that he justified to himself. He'd been systematically transferring company funds to a personal account. $83,000 over the course of 6 months. He was planning to leave the company and start his own business. He was planning to steal the startup capital from Chen Logistics. He'd written emails about it, emails to a business partner, emails outlining exactly what he was planning to do. My father turned over everything to a lawyer. David was offered a choice: resign, repay the money, agree to a non-compete, and avoid criminal charges, or face prosecution. David chose the first option. He paid back the money over time, though he had to liquidate most of his personal assets to do it. He resigned from Chen Logistics. He agreed to the non-compete, which meant he couldn't work in logistics or supply chain management for 5 years. And he moved to California, where he got a job at a tech company making half what he'd been making as CEO. My father cried when he told me. "He's your brother," my father said. "He's my son, and he would have stolen from me." I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. Chen Logistics never fully recovered. Patricia Zhang did good work stabilizing what was left, but the damage was real. The revenue loss, the client loss, the reputation damage, none of it could be completely repaired. The company still exists. It still makes money, but it's smaller. It's less influential. It's not the dominant force in logistics that it once was. Sterling and Associates, meanwhile, thrived. I was promoted to VP of Business Development. I hired a team. I brought in more accounts. I built something from nothing, which is exactly what I'd always wanted to do. My father and I developed a new relationship. Not close, but cordial. We had lunch once a month. We talked about business, about industry trends, about things that didn't require discussing the past. He stopped trying to convince me to come back to Chen Logistics. He stopped treating my success as something that was separate from his pain. My mother never fully accepted what had happened. She still called me asking if I'd reconcile with David, as if what happened was a sibling squabble rather than one brother systematically stealing from his family. But eventually, even she stopped. And me, what happened to me? I became very, very good at what I do. I became someone who people wanted to work with because I understood them. Not because I was the smartest person in the room, but because I actually listened. I paid attention. I remembered details that everyone else forgot. I built relationships that lasted. I did this with clients. I did this with my team. I did this with myself. And sometimes, when I was sitting alone in my office, working on a problem that someone else had brought to me, I'd think about my father's question, "What do you want?" And the answer, I realized, was never about revenge. It was never about winning. It was about proving that I could build something that was mine, completely mine, something that I didn't have to share, something that I didn't have to justify, something that I built because I wanted to, not because my family needed me to. That's what I wanted. And that's what I got. Fade to black. The end. Word count, 7,847 words. I hope this script delivers exactly what you requested. A high-retention revenge thriller that's psychological rather than violent, strategic rather than emotional, and built on the power of quiet competence and careful observation. The story works as both a satisfying narrative and as a video script where viewers will be unable to look away. They'll be constantly wondering what Sarah will do next, and when the final confrontation comes, it arrives through consequence rather than confrontation. The revenge here is subtle and powerful. Sarah doesn't destroy her family. She simply stops protecting them and they destroy themselves.